Welcome back to our channel. Today we'll be talking about honest reflections that are important in the dating and the courting stage. So firstly, we'll try and differentiate between dating and courting so that people understand what it is.
Dating, and I think we live in a hookup culture these days, and dating is like, whenever people just think of dating, they just think dating, and when you hear the word courting, you always think that's outdated, it's for old people, long ago, it's not anything pertinent. But dating is, you could call a casual relationship, and there is no commitment, there are no real boundaries or fixed the commitments, like we're saying, like, no, we're not exclusive, and the degree of seriousness can vary from we meet up when we meet up, or we'll meet regularly, or we're sort of semi-serious. So there's really, at the foundation, there's no commitment to a dating relationship. However, when it comes to courting, on the other hand, and maybe just to say, with dating, it can go on forever and ever like that, because there's no commitment, there are no boundaries to it. Whereas with courting, it's geared toward marriage from the onset, from the beginning. We're getting into this relationship because we're headed towards the ultimate point of getting married. So by definition, courting is usually not a long process. You'd find you're not going to be courting for so many years because your target is to get married. So when you're getting into it, you're both serious, you know what you're getting into. So there's commitment. You're exclusive because you've got a target. And there's, like I was saying, that the time, you're not going to be courting for 4, 5, 6 years. Now, this is not to say, maybe as a caveat, or maybe just as an explanation, that it does not mean, and we're talking about the norm here. This is the norm, the majority of cases. There are cases where people have been together for 5, 6, 7 years, even 10 years, and then they get married. Now, we cannot say that they were courting for that period, although they may have been exclusive and whatnot, but at some point, maybe they decided, okay, now we want to get married. They may have been dating for the majority of it, then they decided to court, and when they got serious and get married, because that's that end stage. And really, from that, maybe I would add to that is, just speaking for myself, I'm not really a proponent for dating. And the way I look at it, and I'm speaking for myself and looking at it from a guy's perspective, is if I'm going to be wanting to marry someone, I'm going to want to get into courtship. There is nothing from my perspective that the girl I'm going to marry is going to gain from having dated multiple partners before me. There is nothing that those experiences are going to bring to the table for me that I would say, okay, this is an asset she's bringing because she's got XYZ. If anything, it's a liability. So that's just my perspective. But yeah, on that last bit.
Okay. I hope you understood from what he said, because he said a lot. But to add on to that, I'll just say, he got it right. I got it the other way, and these are things that I'm only learning now, but we thought we would help other people so that they don't have to make the same mistakes that I probably made. When he came to me, he just knew that he wanted to get married, and I remember saying to you, dude, can you slow down? But now that I've learned that my knowledge has increased and I'm wiser with the age and maturity, I understand that there's a lot of heartbreak I would have saved myself from had I understood the difference between dating and courting. Genuinely, there are people I was with who had said in the beginning, I'll see how this goes. So as he's saying, it's important that you set your expectations up front. I'm not looking to play around. Especially for women, you get to that age where you can't waste the next 5 years just being with someone who wants to have fun. So also, when you look at all that and you look at maybe your past relationships, and you can see that the person really told you from the beginning sometimes that they didn't want anything serious, or their behavior told you that they were not looking for anything serious. So anyway, we're going to share a few tips or a few points on honest reflections that you need to make now that he's explained it. So maybe in the courting stage, or if you've made that mistake like me where you're in the dating stage, maybe reflecting on this will help you see that this is not what you want for the long run. So our first point is, be your authentic self. Don't pretend to be someone you're not because you think that's what your potential partner wants. This is so important.
Yeah, because with being yourself, it's easy. You don't need to put any effort. You're not pretending, you're not acting. Because even with acting, you can act for a period of time. But your true self will eventually come forth. So rather spare yourself the effort and the trouble and all the stress that goes along with pretending, and just be yourself. But then this is not to say that be the worst version of yourself. Be the best version of yourself and remain the best version of yourself. Don't expect to be, to be a slob and then say, hey, take me as I am. No, that's unacceptable. Be the best version of yourself, and that's something you can sustain and do throughout your life. That way, you're never going to have any resentment at some point down the line in the relationship that I did this because of you, and this was so exhausting and so stressful, and now look, we're fighting, or we're now breaking up, and there's all these other things that come along with it. So it's much better to just be yourself. It takes no effort to be yourself.
That's very true. And I think it's so exhausting to also pretend to be someone else, because sometimes you can even lose yourself while trying to be what someone wants. And I think friendship is built on authenticity, which is something that is important in your relationship, because your partner cannot be looking for someone perfect. It's impossible. Perfection is an illusion. Your partner is just looking for someone they can do life with. So it's also good to present your strengths and your weaknesses day one. Be honest to say, you are good at that, and you know what, you're the perfect person, because I'm not good at that, but when you pretend to be something that you're not, where you have an opportunity to grow, you fail to get that, because you're already pretending like, I've already got this. So going to our second point, never take rejection personal. It's better to be with the right person than to force a relationship that is not working.
Yeah, again, I think it's sort of building onto that last one. And with rejection, do not take it personally. Like we're saying, when you're your authentic self, I remember there's this quote I came across yesterday, and I'm trying to remember it, hopefully I will, and it says if I bring up, it says something like, if I bring up something about you that you did in the past, and then you get offended, that means, you shouldn't get offended, because you're not living in the past. But if you get offended, that means that's not you. That happened, but you're not. If you're living in the past, then you're offended. But if you're living in the present, you have detached yourself from whatever it is, because usually someone would want to tear you down or offend you with something negative. So why would you associate yourself in the present with something that happened in the past that was negative? And with the rejection, it doesn't mean, like we're saying, when you're your authentic self, you're being who you are. Now, if someone does not, it's almost like in relationships, you can find someone and say, I was going out with this guy, I was going out with this girl, and then the next thing I found, she's got another guy, or he's got another guy, and he then got married 2 minutes later, and you'd be like, what's going on? And you'd be like, don't take that rejection personally. God saved you. Look at it from that perspective. You are who you are. If that person could not see the value in you, and God allowed them to spare you that heartache, then you're blessed. Look at it for what it is. It's a blessing. Yeah. If that person can go and do that, imagine if they did that when you were married. You were spared. So always, count your blessings.
Yes, and to add on to that, I think I was someone who also used to live in my past where some triggers have really been a struggle. I would also say, if there's a rejection that has happened through your life, maybe even from your parents or even from your past relationships, or I don't know, rejection comes in different forms, but if you see it triggering you in the present relationship, then also get that help that you need. And help comes with the healing, reflecting, because also something you need to reflect on, if you see yourself being rejected over and over again because you are accommodating a certain type, why are you smiling? You're accommodating a certain type of partners, then the problem could actually be with you. So it's important to also heal and not take things personally, because I think sometimes we are our greatest critic, that we struggle with that overthinking, and someone may be trying to help you and you see it as, oh my gosh, how could they even reject me like that? So as Brighton said, that there's some things that God will save you from, and you may not see it in the moment, but if you see that it's affecting you even in your relationships that are going to come in the future, then also take time to heal. It's okay. And then move on when the time is right, when you know that you're no longer offended by every little thing that happens. So yeah. You were smiling. Did you want to?
No.
You want to say, I've come a long way with this woman, huh?
I have, but
no. Wow. Maybe you can highlight what has also helped you in that space.
What specific?
Like maybe in the times that I was not truly confident in myself, because I had gone through a lot of rejection in several areas in my life.
yeah, I think before I even answer, I just want to say, let's not get it twisted that I don't want to come across as perfect in any way, because that's the last thing I am. I've got a lot of shortfalls.
Guys!
But in this particular instant, I think what helps is having a lot of patience and understanding. And again, when you can approach things and realizing that, you know what, I've got my own shortfalls in different areas and you've got yours in particular areas, but then I don't hold that against you, and I at least give you the space, and having that understanding and that open communication, and get to understand, okay, this is what has happened, this is what's causing this, and how you're trying to work through it and get over it. But I guess it's really extending grace, because I know that it may be in a different area. I would want you and would hope you would extend the same grace. So then if I have the opportunity to do that, I should actually rush towards that, because I know there's somewhere where I'm lacking. So I shouldn't want to look at it and say, oh, how can you do this? How can that? You know, that is the worst approach, because at the end of the day, that's not going to help you in any way. And if it doesn't help you, it doesn't help us.
That's true, and I guess that's where the authentic part plays a role, where you're just honest that, you know what, I'm currently struggling in this area, but I'm working on it, so that your partner also knows, you know what, I need to hold your hand while you're going through this process. And then number 3, stop choosing what is not choosing you. If it's not mutual, let go and move on.
Yeah, with this one, yeah, I think it should be pretty straightforward. But then, you know, when it comes to matters of relationships and dating and courting, the heart gets involved, and sometimes the heart speaks louder than the head.
What it wants.
Yes, and it's really a situation where if something is not for you, move away. And again, I would say again, this is speaking for me, like with relationships, the reality of the matter is, when you're now looking, especially when you're looking at courting and dating as grown-ups, there are what you might call disparities, or we are not equal as men and women. That is a given, and because of that, our situations are different. Like when we were growing up, you'd see girls when they're 16, 17, they're already fully developed, like looking at young women, and you can see guys who are outside of school, who drive cars, they're already coming, trying to, you know, date these girls, and you'd be like, hey, what's going on? You know, these are girls our age, we should be the ones dating them. And then you see then you see that you're already being looked at as a woman at that age, and you've matured, you've developed. But then at some point in time, there's going to come where the tables will turn. Because the young guy, you've got nothing, you don't have a car, you're still walking, you don't have any money, you're still going to school, or you're living with your parents. Why would you're not attractive at that stage? But a woman, you just have to be you. And basically, if you bath and you take care of yourself, it's all good. And that's the reality of it. So then you find, as you grow older, those tables turn. So why am I talking about this? The point is that if something is not for you, as women, and as young women especially, be very self-aware and realize this is not for me, and move away quickly. One, you don't want those multiple relationships that will cause you all this trauma that is not going to help you with your final partner. And then there's also, you don't have the time to waste, because if you think, oh, I'm 20, how I can have then you see, I've been in this dated relationship, we're dating for 3 years or 4 years, and then because when you're dating, it can end at any time. There is no commitment, again, remember. Then you're 24, you need time to heal and all that stuff, maybe a year off, and then you go into another 3-year relationship. That's 24, 25, you're now 28. You're like, oh, wait a minute. Let's be real. The time you have to, because you want to have children, maybe you want to have 2-3 children. How long does it take? You're gonna have to meet the right guy, then do the courting, then get married, and more often than not, you're not gonna get pregnant right away. By then, maybe you're 31, 32, and then by 35, you're into geriatric pregnancy. 35 to 42, that's when pregnancies are really dangerous. You know, they're not as safe as they were before that. So you don't have that time. So then don't look at the guy who's your age or you went to school with and think the rules are the same for you. Unfortunately, the reality of our situation is different. A guy at 35 can maybe be equated to a girl at 23. Yeah, that's different. So you don't have the time. So if something's not for you, move and get on to what's right, or wait for what's right.
Yes, he spoke on the women's side, but I think even for the guys, if it's not for you, move on. Don't tolerate something that you know is not going to...
I have a daughter, that's why.
That is not going to last. I think every single one of us can get attached to someone, even though we know that it's not going to go anywhere. But make that tough decision of just saying to yourself, this is not for me, and move on, because our time here on earth is not promised. You can think you'll get to 35, like he's saying, or 40 or whatever, and you realize you have little time on earth. So why would you spend it being miserable with someone who doesn't even appreciate you or who doesn't see your value? Move on. It is better to be by yourself than to be with someone who's hurting you and putting you down. So it takes us to our 4th point, which is almost close to the 3rd one, which says, get clear on what you want in a relationship. you set your standard day one.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, a ship that has no direction is not going to get anywhere, and you keep moving, you'll be moving, but you're not getting anywhere. And like we said, maybe just from the last point, there are exceptions to the rule. But are you willing to bet your life, the one life you only live, on the exception? Rather go play it safe in this particular, or rather play it wise rather than play it safe. Play it wise. There are exceptions. There are people who do get married at 35, at 40. It does happen. But don't bet on the exception. Now, what was this next point we were talking about? Sorry, the door just opened. What was the last point, the next point?
Do not tolerate repeated behavior. Oh, the one we're talking about. Get clear on what you want in the relationship. You set your standard day.
From the onset, this is what you're looking for. And make sure, be self-aware. On this year, it's very important that you have your criteria, that what you are looking for. But at the same time, have the self-consciousness, the self-awareness to realize that what I am looking for, I am also matching. So it's not like, I am just sitting back and waiting for some millionaire to come and sweep me off my feet. What are you going to bring? Like they say, if you marry for money, you will pay for it. You will earn every cent that you marry for. So if you're not willing to bring anything to the table, then you're obviously there's going to be a problem. So your expectations must match your reality. I would put it that way.
And I think it's also important to understand what marriage is, what God called marriage to be, because I think sometimes people just think you get married for love, but there are a whole lot of other things that come with marriage. And this is why sometimes now you're in the marriage, you're like, oh my gosh, this is not what I signed up for, because your version of what marriage is supposed to be came from movies. You were just lonely and you decided you wanted someone, and you did not know that there are responsibilities that come with marriage. So I would also say to you that make sure you actually understand, why did God create marriage? Why do I want to get married? One of the things that we say in coaching is, when you write down a vision, like he said, that know what you want, God also starts bringing it your way. If you don't know what you want, even if it comes, you're not able to identify it because you've never written it down. Like, you don't know what you're working towards. So that is also important. Then our fifth point is, do not tolerate repeated behavior. If someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. I think we have
Repeated bad behavior.
Huh?
Repeated bad behavior.
Do not tolerate bad behavior, repeated bad behavior. If someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. I wish we stopped giving people so many chances when God is showing you, hey, this is not the way I want you to walk. And you're like, no, Lord, this is the person. And sometimes you even insist and go and fast and pray. Yet God would have shown you this is not your person. So I think in the end, a lot can happen.
Yeah, on that, I would say, like we're saying, it's not so much about, but I would even maybe further clarify, do not tolerate. There is bad behavior, like we're not talking about leaving of socks on the floor or leaving the towel on the floor. That's not what we're talking about here. We're really talking about, things that are like, because we call everything red flags and all, but I think sometimes we tend to exaggerate the meaning. We're talking about things that, maybe there's some abuse, there is a threat to your life, there's something that is unsustainable. There are things that you can say, we don't, obviously violence is something you cannot tolerate, that even we shouldn't even wait for it to be repeated. If there is no intervention or help sought after the first incident, then you really need to move, because that is what we're talking about. That cannot be tolerated. You cannot, this emotional abuse, this physical abuse, this maybe cheating repeatedly, philandering, those are things you cannot, they are non-negotiables. I think these go to the previous point about be clear about what you want. So then when you are clear about what you want, then when you see what you don't want, you really know that, whoa, I need to be aware of this. Do I need to move? You need to assess. Do I need to move this? Do I need to move out? Can this be resolved? If not, then remember the time factor. Move quickly.
That is a big one. I think even when it comes to a person repeatedly giving you excuses for not showing up, like you set up a date, they're always busy, they only see you when they want to see you. I've heard a lot of people who talk about, I wish I had listened or seen or acted the first time that the person was not responding to my calls, and you find they only call you at 1 a.m. or those weird hours as if you're a secret, like they're hiding you. So there's certain things that you can see that this person is really not committed. So one thing that I like that someone says is, you can never change a person. They are the ones who make the decision to change, not because you're in a relationship with them, but because they actually want to change. I think sometimes we think that we can change someone. There are people who like fixing people who are toxic and say to themselves, I'm going to make it my burden to fix this person. That is not your job. You're not a savior. Jesus came and died for people. Let that person be fixed by Jesus, not you. It's not your job, because they're not your special case. Allow that person to get help. And some will come and even apologize and cry tears. I've heard people be like, but they cried, and I'm telling you, I just felt like they were sincere, they were trying. No, if someone is sorry, they change their behavior. If they don't change their behavior, don't tolerate it.
Yeah.
Which takes us to the next point: be able to discuss the future together.
Yeah, I was just going to say on that last point, I mean, if their parents failed to fix them in 20 odd years, what are you going to do in the few years you know them? Really? But anyway, what were you saying?
Be able to discuss the future together.
Oh yes, this is maybe one of the most underrated things, because I think people tend, again, we're talking about the head and the heart, we tend to put the heart ahead and just hope that because we feel this way, everything will work itself out. But then there are actual mechanics to marriage, and it's actually practical. The logistics of everything, how things are going to work. You really need to be able to talk about it, because you can be so in love, and then you get together, then you get married. Then when you get in the marriage, then you be like, oh, okay, how about, I just want, then you see your wife is busy fixing up a nursery, and like, hey, what are you doing? But I don't want children. You're like, wait, I want 5. And you're like, oh, what's going on? So you can already see that sometimes it can be so obvious, but you have to talk about these things. Everybody wants children. Not everybody wants children. And how many do you want? Mm-hmm. Maybe you expecting that I'm working now, then when I get married, I'm going to stop working. And then your husband is like, oh, I married you because you are working. So all these kinds of things have to be spoken about, what's going to happen. And you don't have to figure everything out at the moment because you're still young. But you must have an idea. You must also be, as a couple, your two minds should generally be moving in the right direction, understanding. So I should have an idea that even if you're not around and I'm doing something, I should know this is more than likely, this is something you would approve of or agree with or not agree with. And then I can sort of act in that direction. So you should really set out your future and talk about it, because you're going to be in that future together. So it's really important to focus on that.
That's true. And I think some of the hardest things that are important to even discuss is how you're going to raise your children. There are some who can believe the children can always be with their grandparents, and maybe you want to raise them in your own home because you want to impact your wisdom on them, or they don't mind that the children are on holiday, like where the responsibility. I know it takes a village to raise children, but how do you do it? And I think it's also important to also watch how your partner just treats the people around them. Like the way he spends his money or her money, are they wasteful? Are they saving? Maybe you're a person who saves. You want to be with someone who also is a good steward of the things that God has given them. Not a person who's still behaving. Maybe they're 35, but they're acting like an 18-year-old someone. You need to get to a stage where you can see that the person I'm getting married to is mature enough to be in a marriage, So it's also important, even the way they handle their friendships, where they put their friendships before your relationship. If a boy or a woman calls and says, hey, let's do this, even if you've made plans, you see them canceling those plans and saying, but I can't miss out on this fun. And when you look at what they want to do, you're like, seriously, is this person mature? So those things are also important. And I think it goes to our final point, which talks about do not be unequally yoked. Your values and beliefs should be the same. It shouldn't be because we go to church together, we're getting married. Are your values aligned? Because you can be in the same church, but your values are different. And your beliefs, they may see church as an option, and for you it is like a priority. They may see prayer as an option, and for you it's a priority, because what happens is when you get married, the closer you get to God, the closer you also get to each other. So if God is not there, it means when problems comes, which they will, how are you going to be brought together, or how are you going to be humble when you are feeling in that moment that, it's about me? Because marriage really takes two people who are willing to be corrected by God, or people who are willing to be humble, or people who are willing to, compromise. If God says, go back, those things cannot happen if you have different values and beliefs.
Yeah, that's really true. And I think what do I want to say? On this, everything we're talking about being unequal, you of course you've got to be of the same mind, because at the end of the day, with those butterflies in your stomach and all that stuff will fade very quickly when the reality of marriage hits you. You really see that there is, and that time you spend together telling each other sweet nothings, you'd be like, hey, we've got to get down to the reality of it. What's going to happen? Who's cooking dinner tonight? What are we eating? Where's the money coming from? How are we spending our money? All these things like, hey, where are all these bills coming from? What's going on? That's the reality of it. And like you're talking about raising of the children. Oh, no, I went to a private school, so my children are going to private school. But can we afford it? And we've got 3, we've got 4, we've got 5. How can we afford it? And which schools can we send them to? But okay, I need to work. I need to be flying in and flying out. And you'd be like, whoa, I was raised with my dad in the house the whole time, so I expect you to be in the house the whole time. All these things have got to be looked at. And having said all that we've said, I will again really want to stress this. There are exceptions to the rule, but please, it is wiser not to bank on the exception. The rule is the safest way to go. There's a reason it is the rule, because it works. So really, yeah, that's what I'll have to say.
Yeah, and to end, I would also say that all these things I've mentioned, just pray about it and ask God to give you the wisdom on what to apply in your life. Maybe you may find that some of those things don't work for you, which is okay. This is not a prescription, but it's just, we are hoping that someone can be helped, maybe if they don't have someone in their lives who is there to actually guide them when they're going through this stage. This being unequally yoked is so, I think, like, now it's really bad because there's so many things that are coming in the world now that are different from what the word says. Like this whole feminism thing, or this whole, I'm chasing my dreams, and yet you have been brought together by God, and now you find yourselves being in a competition, yet you are married, which is not what God wants. God wants you to work together. And I would say at the end of the day, pray together. It's so important that you start praying together even before you get married. Be able to say, let's put our plans before God. Let's see what God has to say, which is so, so important, because the Bible says thy word is a lamp unto our feet and a light unto our path. So at the end of the day, God is the one who's directing you, and marriage is a ministry. God is going to be using you and wanting to work together. So make sure that you can also continue to be who God has called you to be with the partner that you're with. If they cannot allow you to serve God or to do what God, use the gifts that God has given you, that is something to also move away from. I'll end here, and guys, if you're enjoying these videos, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that the ministry can grow and we can reach out to other people who may be needing this help. Thank you, and bye for now.
Cheers, guys.